Continuing my kind of slapdash, honestly, tour of the Guild Wars 1 equivalents to the Path of Fire regions. Today, we're moving further south than the Crystal Desert. We're going to the location of the third map of the expansion, the Desolation. And when I say we're going south, I mean we're going really far south. In Guild Wars 1 terms, we're currently so far south, not even Path of Fire can reach us right now. And that's because we are in Corner. So I've always liked this specific area of Churai's possession, as you can see here. This is one of those fun moments where you can see the scenery change a lot. What you're looking at here are some of the last trees way to the south of the Desolation as the vegetation breaks away and everything begins to die off and we sort of move into sulphurous devastation and wasteland. So I wanted to start this tour here today, even though we are further south right now than anywhere Path of Fire will take us, because presumably Living World Season 4 will bring us to Corner, of course, and we can do a better insight into Corner itself later. But also, I wanted to come here because this was our initial Guild Wars 1 route into this region of the world. While Path of Fire takes us from north to south, the original game took us from south to north, and it was up through this pathway that we followed Palawa Joko into the Desolation in our pursuit of Varesh Ossa, where eventually we did reach at the very top of Corner with just a few sparse trees left, the Gate of Desolation. And so this was our entrance. As I explained on the previous video in this little mini-series I'm doing here, the actual northernmost boundary to the Desolation was a hard boundary on the map in the original game. There was no bone wall. You know, Joko's kingdom hadn't been established at all, but also mechanically speaking, we couldn't even see that the Crystal Desert was up there. This was how we entered this region of the world, and you'll notice as soon as I hit this outpost, it starts to give away to a lot more shades of yellow, and you'll find that the outposts that we come across are mostly abandoned and only inhabited by lost dynastic spirits and old ascension pilgrims that followed Churai Ossa here long ago. She says, "Live forever, walk until the walk the sands until the sun burns you raw, and now you die." Is that what she said? Christ, it's very dark, the Desolation. So let's read the description. This is one of my favorite descriptions in all of Elona. Once a mighty edifice designed to repel desert raiders like Palawa Joko, described just as a desert raider there, the Gates of Desolation are now a broken skeleton, slowly being reclaimed by the desert. A few determined traders hang on, although their customers are mostly centaurs from the plains. So yes, 250 years ago, what you're watching footage of right now, centaurs were still alive and roaming. We found out in Path of Fire, of course, that Joko had handily dealt with that. I am curious whether maybe in Season 4 or as we move south, places like the Gates of Desolation will have a little bit more information. If this place was once to repel Joko, surely he would have seized control of it now and done something special with it. I actually would have expected in the Crystal Desert, Churai's throne, the throne of Palentia, Joko to have done something more with, but he doesn't really seem to care. Yeah, you really get the sense that we're out on the fringes of society here, just like kind of I described with Amnoon way to the north now. And you get the sense of these lost kingdoms, these once mighty areas of the world that have fallen. Now remember, the lore here is that this desolation, this sulfur, this wasteland has been spreading out. It's been spreading out from the realm of torment since the fall of Abaddon, and especially the tormented aspect of this has been getting worse as Abaddon wrestles free from his prison to the point that the story is currently at in this game. So yes, this is the Gates of Desolation. This was a mission where we quite formally meet with Palawa, and he teaches us, the original game characters, how to traverse the wastes. So the wastes were incredibly deadly. In Guild Wars 2, when you walk into the sulfur, you get packets of damage on you, and it slowly rolls and it slowly rolls. And it's really not that dangerous. Now, the reason they've done it that way is mechanically clear. It's because the design of open world is very different to in the original game, and they found that that worked. Guild Wars 1, at least in terms of mechanics, gave you a much more dreadful sense of the danger of the sulfur. The sulfur in this game, should we stand in it, and you can see how just wide, broken, sandy plains there are here. The sulfur in this game, if we stand in it, it's instant death, and I will show you guys what that looks like. Here we get some enemies, by the way, that haven't appeared in Path of Fire. Mandragore, heavy condition enemies. I think anyone who played Nightfall will remember these quite... have very strong memories of Mandragores. These are like Guild Wars 1 pocket raptors to me. They're enemies you love to hate. And over there as well, we can see some undead. So these are Undead Giants. And I don't think that the Path of Fire expansion really did much of this. But these are Joko's undead, but Joko has been trapped for years, and so they're sentient, they have their own understanding, but they're sort of a separate faction right now. A faction that Joko will now reunite now that he's been freed at this point in the story. And way off in the distance over there, you can actually see some Jinn. So these are the original game versions of the Jinn. I love the design of the Jinn in this game. I don't know why the devs moved so heavily away from this. I think these guys look awesome. So we have a Dervish, a Paragon, and an Elementalist, a Ruby, Diamond, and Sapphire Jinn. I love the look of these Jinn. Look at this guy. Why they moved away from this, I don't know. I mean, I like the mummification look to an extent, but Christ, I think they really missed a trick there with that redesign. Anyway, so yes, the sulfur, these very green, yellow areas. And you guys who saw my VODs after Path of Fire came out and heard me so excited about the Guild Wars 2 interpretation of the Crystal Desert will know what I was talking about now. Look at how similarly and how well this was recreated 10 years later in Guild Wars 2. It really feels the same, doesn't it? So here we will just walk into it and I'll give you a sense of what it's like. No mortal can survive the sulphurous haze, and within a matter of seconds, my entire team dies. And so it was very dangerous. Now, the only way we could get through this was by riding in Jinundu worms. So there's been a lot of talk in Guild Wars 2 lately about how finally the franchise has started doing mounts. The funny thing is, there were some specific places where Guild Wars 1 emulated mounts. It emulated them in the Eye of the North with giant siege devourers that we could ride around on. And particularly, people will call back to this in the original game, the Jinundu. Jinundu do appear in Guild Wars 2. They're mostly just ambient creatures now. These are undead worms that, when we interact with their spores, with the help of Palawa Joko, we learn how to do this, they will actually swallow us up, giving us an entirely new skill bar. And these are basically combat mounts. Combat mounts that we can now walk around in the haze and will be perfectly safe. So there's a lot of design decisions that they made that changed this up. Apparently, and I've still not played it, in Vabi of Guild Wars 2, there is an event that allows you to redo this, which I'm very excited to see at some point. And apparently you get all these old skills back as well. This was even a little bit like the mastery system in that the elite skill you only unlocked later after you sort of trained with them a little bit. A bit like how masteries work with Guild Wars 2 mounts. So this was a thing, and that was how we traveled through these regions of the world. Not all of it was sulfur, but enough of it was that most of the gameplay in the Desolation involved riding around in those super powerful things, and we would fight massive titanic creatures around here. So yeah, that's the sulphurous wastes. Everything I've already talked about in this video is still not in Path of Fire. The most southern reaches we can go in Path of Fire is here, the Bone Palace. This is the most southern boundary, right across here where I just drew my cursor, as far as the Desolation is concerned. So the Alkali Pan and where we get the Joko and stuff, that's all here. The Bone Palace is on the southern border. All of this down here, this Gate of Desolation, the sulphurous wastes themselves, this doesn't exist. On the far side of the sulphurous wastes, we come to the Ruins of Sailaja. I've never really got the pronunciation here right, but there we go. Someone will correct me in the comments. This ruined, and crumbling city was once the home of King Sailaja, last of his line. Sailaja's father had resisted Palawa Joko for years, but with Lord Joko's armies advancing, Sailaja gave in to his fears and cut a deal with the Undead Lord. Shortly after, his citadel was overrun by Joko's undead army. The unlucky king was gutted and his remains animated as Joko's court jester, and he still remains bitter about this. I think I've seen at least item references. He's in Guild Wars 2, is he not? I'm pretty sure he's in Guild Wars 2. I don't know. That's a little reference that I might not have truly understood. So Sailaja is, as I mentioned in a recent video when we were talking about Dejaka, I think it was, it's actually a challenge mission. And so as a challenge mission, there was kind of a bonus thing that we could do. Now, you remember the Dejaka bonus mission took us to areas of the world that were kind of like metaphysical. They didn't really exist on the map. They were like a theoretical location. This one is not a theoretical location. We can actually go do it. Basically, it's Guild Wars 1 doing a mini game that is supposed to play like Pac-Man. Okay? So we will, and it's a solo mission, so I'll quickly load in for you guys here. Essentially, I won't talk to you about all the mechanics in this. But yeah, we're basically playing Pac-Man, but it takes place here at this place, the Dynastic Tombs. And so I really do expect that this should be a thing in Guild Wars 2, the Dynastic Tombs. I hope it will be. It's not too big of an area, and obviously it's beyond the southern boundary, but I think there's lots of fun, interesting, high-quality things that we can get out of this region of the world, and maybe the devs might even do an adventure where we can do a Pac-Man style thing again. I think with the Guild Wars 2 implementation of mounts, it could be quite interesting. We're mostly just stuck on Jinundu here, but the idea that we could go around collecting things, utilizing all of our mounts, all 5 of them, or maybe 6 by the time Living World Season 4 comes out, that could be pretty interesting. You'll also notice this is the closest we can get to like this mountain range with these, where they even on the art put these snow-capped peaks. I don't think these are really here in Guild Wars 2. I don't know whether we'll get an icy region of the world here. But given the size of the maps, you know, if they add one, we could potentially get all of this explorable now as well, should they do a map south of the Desolation. So that's all these regions. Moving north, we travel through Joko's domain and finally get to the Bone Palace. So I will show you guys what this looks like. I was very excited to come back here in Path of Fire because of the suggestions of areas like high up. There's somewhere on the Bone Palace in the original game that you can see here that has like a very high bridge, a cutscene takes place there where 2 characters like declare their love for one another and so forth. But I can't see it. I can't see it in the actual map. But I was always excited to climb around, and the Guild Wars 2 Bone Palace does have that. Oh, is this the bridge? Am I just totally wrong? This is the bridge that the cutscene appears in? But I was excited to come back because it's this big, vast area, and you want to be able to go inside. I did enjoy the second game's interpretation of the Bone Palace. I miss some of these varieties of Undead now, though. And of course, this is where Joko begins to rebuild his strength. And indeed, as you can see here, he's just a regular NPC we can speak with in the original game. In fact, he has a quest for me on my main character, no less. He says, I'm impressed by your confidence of the battlefield. Had you been on my side during the Battle of Jahai, perhaps history would tell a different tale. This is the Joko. And so we've got these different quests. So I was in the middle of a show of force there. And he was talking a bit about Abaddon. We've got Return of the Undead King, pop culture reference to Lord of the Rings there. And here he's asking for our help in bonus endeavors to help him reclaim more control, essentially. We won't be doing those quests in today's video. Here we've got a little bit of lore. The Bone Palace. The very name strikes terror in the hearts of all Elonians. From this dark, foreboding edifice, Palawa Joko struck out across the desolation to conquer Elona. It is said that the souls of the dead enslaved by Palawa Joko still writhe within the walls, screaming for release. Ah, oh, brilliant. I didn't really get that impression from the second game. But what a cool place, and hopefully we get a lot more of this in Living World Season 4, let me just say. I want this to be kind of the new Rata Novus, if you will. So at this point, you'll notice that there's another outpost over here on the right. So the main story, really, it takes us into the Shattered Ravines a little bit to get a Jinundu skill, but generally where we fight some the Undead Jinundu queens or whatever. And this is actually out of range as well. On the Guild Wars 2 map, this is out of range off here on the top right. But then we just move on and end up confronting Varesh, because that's really why we were here. There are some extra things, though, namely the Basalt Grotto. So I opened this video today talking about an entrance to the Desolation. There was a side entrance, a sneaky bonus extra way in, a hidden path, and it was this. It was the Basalt Grotto, and you'll notice that there are Vabians here. This is on the border of Vabi, and it's through this direction, I believe, that Joko is going to reconquer Vabi in the next 250 years. I always loved the Basalt Grotto. I have a special place in my heart in the original Guild Wars for weird outposts that never really had any reason to come to, and you'd never really find anyone there. Like the first one that I always think of and fondly remember is like the Ice Tooth Cave in the northern Shiver Peaks. Most campaigns had locations like this. Of no significance, but they're there. And so, yeah, this was just sort of a side entrance. The main story didn't actually take you through the side entrance. And of course, we know in Path of Fire that this is the main way we get to Vabi. There's kind of an awkward gap between the two maps, which I think is really unfortunate. And hopefully they'll fill in at some point. But this is how we get there. So the lore on this one says, it has been a long rumoured that there exists a safe passage between the Desolation and Vabi. A passage discovered and used to brutal effect by Palawa Joko when he invaded, before now. The winding passages of the grotto are known to but few who guard that knowledge jealously out of fear out of greed. And so this is the Basalt Grotto. I don't really particularly recall Path of Fire doing much justice to this area, but maybe it exists in that weird space between the two maps that we sort of warp through. Moving north, there's more bonus areas. So there is the Lair of the Forgotten. Now this is the location of a heart in Path of Fire. an outpost, if you will, though I don't think they formally stuck with the outpost idea as they had in Heart of Thorns. The Lair of the Forgotten is now quite close to the Crystal Desert again, and for that you'll notice Forgotten influence again, so we can see these pillars leaning around. This is where Dunkoro, as his ghost, comes to rest, and several of these ghosts are the same ghosts we will meet in the sequel, amazingly, which is brilliant. But most importantly about the Lair of the Forgotten is some of the quests you can get here. And there's a very important quest to do with the Scepter of Ore. So let's speak to Vish Rakesh here, who says, this world has circled the heavens countless times since I last gazed upon caring eyes. What brings you here, young one? And we get 2 quests, okay? First is Forgotten Retribution, which is just kill lots of Margonites because they're slaying the Forgotten. But you've got Cold Touch of the Past. It's a master difficulty quest, which was a new mechanic Nightfall introduced, where you had difficult quests, usually paired with important lore, but nonetheless were side quests. He says, servants of the Fallen One wander across these lands in search of some way to free their master. Once my people were many and strong enough to stop them, but now I am only of a handful who remain. The Margonites draw closer to finding what they seek. If they are not stopped, they will wreak havoc upon this world. One such demon seeks an ancient relic known as the Staff of the Mists. The Scepter and its twin, the Scepter of Ore, were created long ago, when this desert was still an ocean. The Staff of the Mist contains great power and allows the wielder to bend the fabric of reality. So the Scepter of Ore was bending like sort of the ethereal realm, and I don't know whether they expressly call it the Mist, but this one's bending the fabric of reality, okay? If the Margonites are allowed to possess the Scepter, they will be unstoppable, and you must find it before they do at all costs. The Staff of the Mists lies buried beneath an altar in the southern reaches of the poisoned Badlands, protected by ancient magic. Really important quest, really great quest. And so we move north into the poisoned outcrops up here. And again, I can't... this quest, essentially, we recover it and we throw it into this abyssal pit and destroy it. But that pit is something I was really looking for in Path of Fire and I couldn't find. So while the Lair of the Forgotten reappears, the place at the destruction of this artifact doesn't. And I wonder why the devs were quite... cavalier about ignoring that, because I think that this was one of the most important things about the Desolation, especially considering One Path ends and the reintroduction of Livia, and a direct reference to the sister scepter very recently, the Scepter of Ore. So I think that that's interesting, and maybe it's a sign that they're going to do something more with it, or it's the worst sign possible and they're not going to do anything at all. But yeah, so we do get to see the Forgotten. Here we get the lore. It says, time has not been kind to this last bastion of a once great empire. The erosion caused by the outward creep of the Realm of Torment has eaten away at the very foundations of this forgotten citadel, dropping much of it into a vast sinkhole. It is said that lone living witnesses to the Margonite assault on the gates of heaven and Abaddon's defeat at the hands of the 5 true gods still resides here, all but abandoned to the mists of time. And I don't think they're really developed on that in Path of Fire either. So there is something else. Hopefully I can show you to the south of this outpost. And let's see if I can quickly get to the door. If we walk through here, I believe we should meet some ghosts out there. I think they're near the portal. If they're not, we won't show it off in the video. But I believe we'll meet the ghost. I think they're, what are they? The Odd Bodies. And these are ghosts that reappear also in Guild Wars 2. Also, I really enjoy that. I enjoy meeting the exact same characters, the exact same ghosts, and really driving it home just how long these guys live. Yeah, these guys here create Aurorus and Larino and Chessa that talk about Rin from Ascalon. These guys are still here, right? Hey, I shall leave this dreadful place and return to Rin. And of course, in the second game, we realize he hasn't done that. And they have their little quests going on. These were also some of the more fun areas. There was data mined lore talking about like giant statues, like giants that are sunk into the ground as well in this area. The Desolation was so full of interesting things. Moving towards the Alkali Pan and the ruins of Moira now, with the main story. Moira, I'm pretty disappointed with in Path of Fire. In my head, in my imagination, in my sort of fan version of this world, of this universe that you know, you just think about. I love the thought of this being some massive ruined city, a bit like Osgiliath or something, right? And we get a sort of sense of it. These very urban-looking buildings, of course, which also appear in the Crystal Desert. We get a slight sense of it here in Guild Wars 1, but not a great one. And I was really hoping that this was going to be a place that was done very well in Path of Fire. And honestly, everything around the Mouth of Torment, I think, wasn't done very well in Path of Fire. None of these buildings really reappeared, and I don't know. I think that's disappointing. But to get to the lore here, this was a city built right where Abaddon fell, right? But, of course, over enough time was destroyed. inside. So the grandeur of this ancient Elonian city can still be seen amid its crumbling visage, echoes of a noble and grand purpose. Originally established to watch over the mouth of torment, Moira was ever a haunted place. It was abandoned 200 years after its founding, succumbing to the spread of the desert. Recent ruptures from the crater have further destroyed this once majestic city as the realm of torment seeps in through the cracks in reality. Like, it really gives you this sense of, you know, lost human kingdoms that Tolkien presented as, like, sort of Gondor receded and so forth, further away from Mordor. I love this. I really love this, and I've got to say, this is one of my big disappointments about the second map. About the second expansion. There is another really cool thing here as well. To actually get to this outpost, we had to destroy a giant like pillar that was stretching into the sky called the Solitary Colossus, and I was trying to find that too, and that didn't really seem to have much of an appearance. But it's here that we take the fight to Varish Ossa. She is defeated, but as she's defeated, the portal to the realm of torment opens, and so this is it right here. You guys will notice that this exact appearance, this exact effect, reappears in Guild Wars 2 at the Tomb of the Primeval Kings. By the time the sequel Path of Fire's out, there's basically just like a metal grating over this. We hear that Balthazar's forces are inside. As to exactly how or what they've been doing there, maybe they'll reveal it a little bit later on. But this was actually the site of a boss battle that then becomes an outpost and a vortex. So this swirling vortex unleashed by the death of Varish Ossa leads to the realm of torment. We're not going to go there. If I actually walk in here, we get this effect, right, approaching the vortex. If I walk close enough, I will warp into the mists and we'll be in the final chapter of Nightfall. We're not going to do that in this video because we're more interested in the Desolation. Here's the Mouth of Torment. It was here that Abaddon and his Margonites challenged the power of the five true gods, and here that the other gods smote the god of secrets down, imprisoning him and his following in a realm of torment. This once beautiful land is now a crater, littered with the trapping of a god. And above it, the Mouth of Torment hangs, a weakness in this world, a globe of pure evil, beckoning all to their doom. Oh, love it. Absolutely love it. And so, yeah, when we look at the idea of an Abaddon Fractal, it's here that the Abaddon Fractal would have taken place. It's amid, hopefully, I've always liked to imagine that Moira, this beautiful, amazing city, was also there, perhaps at the time. And we see the Margonites and Abaddon versus the other gods. We also hear from Path of Fire, of course, that it was the actual, the strength of this clash that dried up the sea. I like the thought that this was like an island, right? In the middle of the sea with Margonite ships surrounding everyone on it. And we get to see that in fractal form. How cool does that sound? Of course, it sounds very cool. And whether they could realistically implement that or not is another matter entirely. So that's most of the Desolation. Now, finally, if there's one final bonus area too, and when I say a bonus area, I really mean a bonus area. There's so little reason to do anything. But if you do walk quite far away from the Ruptured Heart, and this was actually pretty dangerous, deadly territory we're in here, but if you do walk, you will eventually find that there is one bonus map over here, the Crystal Overlook. Now, the Crystal Overlook has a really interesting sort of visual style to it, and it looks a lot like the Crystal Desert. And it's from the Crystal Overlook that we can actually see the Crystal Desert itself, which I do want to show you guys, and I do want to show you the teleporter and sort of the bonus way to get up to the Crystal Desert itself. It's going to take a little bit of fighting to get there, though, so just give me 1 second and I'll just cut it ahead. But you see that bridge over there on the left? We're just going to cross that bridge, but we've got to kind of zigzag our way. And as I've made the case many times, moving in Guild Wars 1 is a lot slower. It's a very different style of game. So I'll see you guys in a second. Interesting, there's a hyena here, and a hyena do exist in Guild Wars 2. Why didn't they put many hyena littering the desert? That would have been fitting, right? They could have even added them into that Lion King reference we saw in the first map. Alright, so here we go. As we cross over these bridges now, we come to the Crystal Overlook. So here we are in the Crystal Overlook, and as we cross this bridge, you'll recognize that the kind of assets and things they're using suddenly look a lot more like we were looking at in the previous video when I was in the Crystal Desert itself. And if you look over here on the right, you'll notice that there's a pretty interesting thing that Guild Wars 1 was doing. And this was always very special, again, because remember, the continents themselves were not necessarily connected via world map. Wow, I just walked into about 1 million traps. I'm probably going to die from that there. All right, no, we're good. So you'll notice something pretty interesting here. There's these buildings, first of all, which look a lot like what we were seeing at what was it? Alona Reach, I think, was the mission where we were seeing these. We've got obviously lots of Ascension pilgrims and something of a makeshift ghost town, like quite literally a ghost town here. And if I look out over on the right, you will notice a statue. And you can see it all the way over there. That statue is the Lonely Vigil statue. That is the Mirage statue. The thing that if we walk close to it, it will then appear collapsed on the ground. So what we're actually looking at there is a point of interest, is a landmark in the Crystal Desert. This is our most direct way of being able to connect the two, and I believe people use this sort of thing to triangulate positioning and so forth. Over there on the other side of the chasm as well, you'll see this structure, this pyramidical structure. That's actually the forgotten teleporter that warps us from one side to the other, and if we move further into the Crystal Overlook, we'll actually be able to get there, and that's our connection between the two regions. That's how it worked before, and yeah, that's the Desolation really, guys. That's the main stuff that was going on. That should give you a sense of what this region of the world was like, and it should also give you a sense of the fact a lot of this still isn't explored. Like the slice here on the right hasn't been explored, and this area, especially with the Jinundu, hasn't been explored. Neither is this stuff on the south, and hopefully now you can get a sense of what this was all like and how they've managed to recreate it a decade later. So thanks very much for watching, guys. Next time we will do the final region as well, which has probably got the most to talk about of all, and I'll try to do a good job on it, and that is when we actually move through the Basalt Grotto into the Vengean Mines and we talk about Vabi, which you'll just see immediately from all the icons and things going on. There's a lot to say. A lot of it's been branded now, of course, but that should be pretty interesting too. So I hope to see you guys there. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll be back very shortly.